In this lesson, we'll attempt to make some complex things simple for you. Today, you'll begin operating complex aircraft. Before we depart on our lesson, let's quickly review the takeoff and climb checklist. Click the kneeboard icon on the accessory panel or press F10. Then select the checklist tab, scroll down and review the takeoff and climb checklist. When you're done, close the checklist and we'll depart. We're ready to go and the pattern is clear, so let's blast off. So let's release those brakes and apply full power and take to the air. Remember to make a quick glance at the engine instruments after full power is applied. We want to catch any potential problems while we're still on the ground. There's 90 knots. Let's rotate to an attitude that will give us an initial climb speed of 105 knots. The VSI is showing a positive rate of climb and there's no more usable runway, so press G to raise the gear. I could say gear up, but you might think I said cheer up, and I know you're already happy. Check the gear lights to make sure the gear has indeed retracted. We're at 500 feet AGL, so let's lower our nose to the cruise climb attitude and climb at 136 knots. If you haven't already done so, trim the airplane to maintain this attitude. Now that we're at a safe maneuvering altitude of 1,000 feet above the field, let's set the power and RPM for the climb. Speed up. First, we'll reduce the manifold pressure to 25 inches, and then we'll reduce the RPM to 2,500. Speed up. As I'm sure you remember from ground school, this airplane requires us to move the throttles forward to maintain the desired manifold pressure during the climb. For every 1,000 feet of altitude gain, we'll have to add approximately 1 inch of manifold pressure. So let's move the throttle forward right now to keep the manifold pressure at 25 inches. Let's turn to a heading of 100 degrees to head toward the practice area. I want you to climb to and level out at 5,000 feet. We're coming up on 5,000 feet, so let's begin the level off. First, lower the nose while keeping the power at its present setting and let the airplane accelerate to a cruise speed of 170 knots. With this airplane, it's okay to feel the need for speed, so trust your thrust and don't reduce the power until you're at 170 knots. When reaching that speed, let's reduce the manifold pressure to a value of 22 inches. Then we'll reduce the RPM to 2300. These will be our cruise power settings. Don't forget to use the trim to relieve the control pressure whenever you make big changes like this. Based on the present engine temperatures, we should close the cowl flaps to prevent our engines from overcooling and turning our pistons into little icebergs. Let's close both of them now. Now that we're in level flight, let's see how to make this bigger, faster airplane descend. Larger airplanes always present one problem to pilots, and that is trying to get them down. They move fast and, as a result, don't come down as fast as we want them to. You can, however, use the faster speed capability of a complex airplane to help you descend if you start your descent soon enough. Let's try this. I want you to keep your manifold pressure where it is and lower the nose to about 4 degrees below the horizon to establish a speed of 210 knots. Maintain this speed until reaching 3,000 feet, then level out. You're also operating in the airspeed indicator's yellow arc, which isn't used during great sunsets. It's okay to fly in this speed range as long as the air is smooth. Pull back on the stick. We're coming up on 3,000 feet, so let's begin our level out now. You're too high. Descend. Let's turn left to a heading of 010 degrees. Otherwise, we're going to need to go back and get your passport because we'll end up in another country. Now I want you to climb back to 5,000 feet. I want you to see how we manipulate the throttle and propeller controls when entering a climb. From our ground school lessons, I'm sure you recall that you must first increase the RPM to that appropriate for a climb, then follow this with an increase in manifold pressure. So let's raise the nose now to the climb attitude for a 136 knot cruise climb and increase the RPM to 2,500. Pull back on the stick. Now let's increase the manifold pressure to 25 inches. Don't Don't forget to open those cowl flaps to keep the engines cool. Use that trim too. We're coming up on 5,000 feet, so let's level out and accelerate to 170 knots. You're too low. Climb. Then reduce power to 22 inches first, followed by a reduction in RPM to 2,300 in that order. Remember, these are our cruise power settings. Don't forget to close those cowl flaps too. Lowering the gear is another way to get this airplane to descend quickly. Before we can do this, we need to slow the airplane down to the maximum gear extension speed, which on this airplane is 152 knots. We're going to reduce the manifold pressure to 15 inches while holding level flight and slow the airplane down to 152 knots, then begin our descent. I must mention that we really should only reduce the manifold pressure approximately 1 inch per minute to slow the airplane down. This would keep the engines from overcooling. For the purposes of training, we'll make things happen faster with larger power reductions. So reduce the power to 15 inches and slow down now. Keep the airplane in level flight as you reduce the power. There's 152 knots, so lower the gear. Be prepared to compensate for a slight pitch change when the gear is lowered. Always check to see that you have 3 green lights after the gear has been lowered. Now I want you to lower the nose and begin a descent at the present power setting of 15 inches to 3,000 feet. Since the maximum gear operating speed is the same as the maximum gear extension speed, we'll keep the speed at 152 knots. Notice how the airplane is descending at nearly 1,200 feet per minute at this slower speed. You can also count on the airplane to slow down more quickly as the nose is raised. Remember to reduce the power 1 inch of manifold pressure per 1,000 foot of descent to keep it at 15 inches. When we level off, we're going to do so at a speed of 120 knots. We'll be adding some flaps and level flight attitude to simulate how we fly this airplane in the traffic pattern. Pull back on the stick. We're coming up to 3,000 feet, so let's begin our level off. Raise the nose and let the airplane slow down to 120 knots. Then increase your power to 17 inches of manifold pressure. This should allow you to fly level with the gear down at approximately 120 knots. Don't forget to add some trim to keep the airplane in the desired attitude. Now that we're below the top of the airspeed indicator's white arc, let's apply approach flaps by moving the flap switch down to its first position. Keep the power at 17 inches and maintain your altitude. Be prepared to compensate for a slight pitch change when applying flaps. Notice how the airplane is slowed down an additional 10 knots to 110 knots with flaps down. This will be a good speed and gear flap configuration to fly the downwind leg when operating in the pattern. Let's turn to a heading of 170 degrees. Add a little power if necessary to keep the airplane at approximately 110 knots during the turn. Now let's simulate entering a climb from a gear down, partial flap descent. We'll need to add power, then clean up the airplane in a specific order. And I don't mean pick up cups and glasses when I speak of cleaning up the airplane. I'm speaking of retracting flaps and gear to make the airplane climb efficiently, just as we would if we were on final approach to land and had to make a go-around because a tire-popping porcupine strolled out unexpectedly on the runway. We'll do this by increasing the RPM to 2,500 first, increasing the manifold pressure to 25 inches next, then raising the nose to climb attitude, followed by retracting the gear and then the flaps. Ready? Let's do it. First, move the prop control forward and increase the RPM to 2,500. Next, increase the power to 25 inches of manifold pressure. Now, raise the nose to climb attitude for a climb at 136 knots. And raise the gear and check the gear lights for proper retraction. Finally, retract the flaps. And don't forget to open those cowl flaps to prevent engine overheating during the climb. Use whatever trim you need to help you maintain the desired attitude. Excellent. You are now in a climb with the airplane in the clean configuration. Let's level out at 4,000 feet and head back to the airport to put all we've learned into practice. When level, let the airplane accelerate to 170 knots while climb power is still applied. When reaching 170 knots, reduce the power and RPM to our previous cruise settings of 22 inches and 2,300 RPM in that order. When you're level, close those cowl flaps. Good job. Let's head back to the airport. To do this, we need to find the airport, and I can't think of a better way to do so than using your GPS. I'll keep us flying straight and level while you work out the navigation. Push the GPS button on your instrument panel and let's see where Bremerton is. Plot a direct course for Bremerton in the GPS and press the control and left bracket keys when you're ready to move on to the next phase of the lesson. Begin the high-speed descent by lowering the nose to an attitude that will give you a speed of 210 knots. We're going to descend for a straight-in to runway 19 at Bremerton. Speed up. There is a way to properly plan for these descents, but we only have so much time, so we'll save those details for a later time. Right now, we'll just use our intuition to see if we can manage to be at or near traffic pattern altitude when we approach Bremerton. Speed up. We're going to level off at 1,400 feet and align ourselves with runway 19. We're now in a position to slow the airplane down some more and lower the gear and flaps for our final descent. Let's reduce the power to 15 inches, slow the airplane down to below its maximum gear extension speed of 152 knots, then lower the gear. Let's continue to slow the airplane down to 120 knots, then we'll apply approach flaps all the while holding our altitude. Now I want you to turn and align yourself with runway 19. At this point, I want you to begin your descent and remain on the poppy. We'll use an approach speed of 105 knots. Reduce your power as necessary to fly at 105 knots and keep the airplane on the glide path. As you recall from our ground school session, now is a good time to use the GUMP verbal checklist. The gas is on both tanks, the undercarriage is down, the mixtures are full rich, and the propellers are okay for now. We'll place the propellers in their full forward position when we're about ready to cross the threshold, where we'll do our GUMP checklist one more time. When you're ready to flare, reduce the power and let the airplane settle in. Okay, just apply the brakes and let the airplane slow down on the runway. Don't raise the flaps because it's too easy to accidentally raise the gear, which would really shorten your stopping distance. Congratulations! You've just successfully completed your complex airplane checkout.